Hello. Right.
Hello, everyone.
Good evening.
Good
Time
evening.
to get this party started.
Hi, Eudell. Hi, Jeff.
Hi, everybody. Oh, we got lots of people joining and waving. Welcome. We're excited to have you here for our number 2 Factory Team Flavor Talk.
We'll let a few folks join before we get officially rolling here, but before we get into the intros and all of that, for all of you folks joining us for the very first time, I'll just give you a little idea of what Factory Team Flavor Talk is all about. So as you guys all know, there are hundreds, maybe even more than that, different seasonings and barbecue products out there in the world today. But for the same reason we created the Factory Team Flavor Guide, there's a niche out there, I think, to understand what's behind these things. What do they really like? So they're more than just a label or a SKU on Amazon or Barbecue Pro Shop. And this series we developed just to really bring to life the people that are behind some of our favorite products out there.
Absolutely.
Well said.
People still joining. Very well said, Brian.
So we are just now at the top of the hour, so what do you think? Maybe 30 seconds and then we'll start her up.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us. We see some familiar names or handles here and some new folks as well.
Thanks to everyone who joined us last month when we met with the team from Willingham's. Very interesting conversation about a brand that's been around quite a while, but as you guys are about to find out, not nearly as long, at least in terms of history, as Old Arthur's, the brand we're going to talk about tonight. So Jeff Belmonte, why don't you get us rolling here and kick things off?
Would love to. Thanks, Brian. Hey, everybody. Welcome to our second edition of Factory Team Flavor Talk. We got Eudell Watts from Old Arthur's Barbecue here. And, of course, we got Ann and Brian, the Smoke Freaks from the Barbecue Pro Shop Factory Team. One thing at the top of the hour, and then I'm going to turn it right over to Brian because we have a lot of material. I think you'll see why really soon, and we're glad everybody's here to listen in. What I wanted to let you know is we still are doing a Factory Team giveaway. So the Factory Team has picked out the spicy Old Arthur's barbecue sauce, as well as another mystery flavor of Old Arthur's barbecue sauce. But if you go to our post, you will see it live. So you can see exactly what you're about to win. Comment, tag people, make sure you like Barbecue Pro Shop. That's a requirement to win. Tag some people that should also like it. Get them in there to like it. And then we're going to get you in here. And by the end of the this time here, about a half hour or so, maybe a little bit longer, depending, we are going to go ahead and announce the winner. So with that, I'm going to turn it right over to Brian and Ann and get this whole thing started. Thanks for all being here, and we'll keep an eye out for comments, so keep your questions coming. Thanks so much.
Hello, everybody. We are here tonight with Eudell Watts the fourth. Thanks for joining us, Eudell.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
And Eudell is the proprietor, founder, lots of things, wearing many, many hats at a brand called Old Arthur's Barbecue Sauce. And they do happen to make quite a bit more than barbecue sauce. In fact, they've got more seasonings than sauces at this point, and they're all some really exciting products. But speaking of exciting, I am really excited to be here tonight, really for two big reasons. Number one, it is pretty rarely, in fact, I'll say never, that I get to interview somebody who's involved with a brand that has roots going back literally more than 150 years. And as I got to hear and learn a little bit about it, I realized I had some personal connections to some of the stories and the places and things that I believe it was your great-great-grandfather. Is that who the impetus behind Old Arthur? And I assume the name itself comes from him, right?
Absolutely.
So that's reason number one. It's a really, really storied brand with amazing stories that go behind it. Reason number two is you've really got a handsome lineup of products here that I've just recently had the opportunity to test for our flavor guide. And I got to tell you, these I think they fit within a lot of classic molds, but they're all quite unique within the space. And for whoever our lucky winner is tonight, I guarantee you've never had a rub quite like the one you're going to get tonight if it's from Old Arthur. So let's get rolling. Sir, Eudell, I would love to start, if you don't mind, with a bit of the story and the history that takes us back those 160 plus years to what's now become the brand Old Arthur's. How did this all get going?
As you've alluded to, it's a really long story, but I'll try to truncate it a bit. But before I get started, I just want to say, Jeff, thank you for having me on. Brian and Ann, I'm excited to be able to have an opportunity to tell you our story. So, if you think about the products that you had an opportunity to experience, over the last couple of weeks, once you got your hands on our sauces and rubs, what you're essentially tasting is one man's hand over the course of a century. I like to refer to his sauce as the sauce of the century. And let me tell you why. So, you've already said Arthur was my great-great-grandfather. And if you look at our label, that is a photo of Arthur from 1916. He was probably, I don't know, I haven't done the math. He's somewhere in the neighborhood of 78, 79 years of age. That is literally him having just taken it's believe it or not, that's a goat's leg off of an open pit, and he's kind of showing it off there, knife in one hand, goat's leg in the other. And the photo does go back to 1916. You can see it on our website. But Arthur started out life enslaved in Kansas City, Missouri. He was born into slavery. His job from the earliest of ages revolved around open pit barbecuing. As a 5, 6, 7-year-old, he was responsible for making sure that the open pits always had wood available. He was owned by a farm that sold meat commercially in Randolph County in the Kansas City area. And again, as a youngster, he was responsible for making sure there was always wood for the open pits. As he grew a little bit older in his teens, somewhere around the age of 14, he was assigned the responsibility of manning the open pits and cooking the tremendous amounts of meats that they were roasting and selling commercially. And that was his job, day in and day out. As a slave, there was no such thing as a weekend or a holiday. And so you fast forward, he found himself freed at the age of 28 at the end of the Civil War. The Emancipation Proclamation granted him his freedom, and he left Kansas City on foot with the only thing of value that he had, which were his recipes and his skill at open pit barbecuing. And so, he wound up, somehow over the course of who knows how long, he wound up in Central Illinois. And, with nothing to his name, he began soliciting opportunities just for any type of menial labor he could get, cleaning, just carrying, just whatever. But eventually he was able to begin to carve out a name for himself, not only just cooking for people, but with his specialty and his recipes in open pit barbecuing. And
can I interrupt you just for a minute to explain a little bit about the concept of open pit barbecue? A lot of people probably never actually seen this way of cooking where the term pitmaster originally comes from. Can you tell us a little bit about what's an open pit?
It is literally a trench that is dug in the ground. Most rudimentary version, a trench that's dug in the ground. Ideally, it's about 4 feet deep. You throw, your burnable wood in the bottom of it. You can top it with green saplings because they're not going to catch fire, and then literally place your meat over it. And again, it's 4 feet elevated. And you're literally, setting the wood on the bottom. Actually, first you're setting the wood on fire, turning it into hot embers, hot coals, and then you can place your green saplings over it, place your meat, and then keep an eye on it, rotating it as necessary. But you are literally cooking over a hole in the ground with hot coals down inside of it. As Arthur, developed his reputation as a pitmaster in Central Illinois, he grew from being just somebody that you could hire to come and cook to literally being the go-to pitmaster if you're having a city festival, a county fair. they would send for him from his home in Kewanee. And by the way, he was the original pitmaster for the Kewanee Hog Fest. They would send for him from his home in Kewanee. He would come to town, literally about 125-mile radius around Kewanee, and execute massive barbecues. He would come with the stipulation, asking about open pits. He'd come with the stipulation that the community had to provide the manpower to dig a proper pit. So for him, doing a community event, that pit, and there are photos on our website, that pit is 40 feet long, it's 4 feet deep, and it's 6 feet wide. And then, he would place 2 layers of cinder block, and then either pipe or rebar over the, spaced like every 5 feet over the length of that 40 feet. And then they would roll out cattle wire. And they had already placed in the bottom of it oak timber that they had burned during the day. So when they rolled out that cattle wire at night and then filled the top of it with pork shoulder, they would literally station men every 6 feet on both sides of the pit with brand new pitchforks to turn those shoulders through the night, so that by about 10 in the morning, the shoulders would be ready to be taken off and sliced for sandwiches.
The town supplied the labor for helping him turn all that meat all night as well?
Yeah, and that was the agreement. He would come and do the barbecue if they supplied the manpower to dig the trench, to turn the meat, and he also needed a team of butchers. The Kewanee Hog Festival, we have newspaper clippings going. I have a clipping that goes back to 1916, in which he fed 11,000 people on a Saturday afternoon. I have another one in which he fed 30,000 people over the course of a Labor Day weekend. And so it takes a team of butchers to literally, because they don't have slicers, they are slicing pork shoulder by with knives for sandwiches.
Now I know some Illinois history buffs may be on here, and for sure the competition guys from around here would know that Kewanee, Illinois, during World War II and around that period was known as the hog capital of the world.
Yes,
so
sir.
This is no joke to be the #1 pitmaster in the hog capital of the world. And I just can't even wrap my head around just the amount of protein that was moving through that little town back then.
If you think about the like modern refrigeration, modern technique for slaughtering and all that, they were doing everything like old school, the hard way. I can't even get my mind around the operation required to prepare and rub the shoulders to put them on the pits, let alone manning the pits and preparing meat.
It really boggles the mind when you start to think of the scale. I mean, it's not like they had a backhoe they were going to dig this trench with.
Oh, no.
Right? And I mean, how many wagon loads of wood are we talking about coming in to fill up and keep something like that going for 12 hours?
Brian, I forgot to tell you as part of the story, and I'll circle back to what you just said. Arthur lived until he was in demand as a pitmaster through his 107th birthday. He lived to be 108. He plowed his own fields walking behind a plow horse at 106. And so, you scratch your head. It's like, how could this be? If you see photos of him, I think Jeff has some on his website. We certainly have them on our website. But if you see photos of him, you appreciate how fit and how virile he looked. But my father has in fact, I have him here at the house because I'm going to have him professionally photographed. We have a lot of his tools that he used, including like when he did an open pit barbecue, he would, it would be in a field. He would literally have to use a sickle or a scythe, however you pronounce it, in order to cut
those
the tall grass.
things like the Grim Reaper has.
That thing is massive, and it weighs about 40 pounds. I could not wield that for more than a few minutes before having to take a seat. And if he was doing that at that age, that explains how he got that far.
Yeah, for sure.
clearly a lot of love for this brand. I want to just read a couple of comments that have come in because it just captures it in the story. Old Arthur's is incredible. Love the spicy sauce. Old Arthur's sauce goes on everything. Outstanding. I have all of their rubs, one for every protein. Barbecue history lesson, such an incredible story. And bootleg rub-on steaks, sauce of the century.
Indeed, and Eudell, I know that you've been quite successful in getting some really good press over the years since you started this brand, and it's really no wonder. The story is quite amazing and remarkable in and of itself, and you do such a nice job of bringing it to life. So you're saying he was pitmaster up to about 106, 107. That's quite a career,
Yeah.
Burning the coals. Yeah. And I've been in competition barbecue for a while, and most of us, our bodies go the other way real quick once we start getting into that thing. And I think something about he's probably raising his own hogs and raising his own food. It sounds like too, huh?
Well,
he was.
Yeah, you got to figure they had a much more natural lifestyle than certainly we do in this day and age. But he enjoyed a little nip every now and then too. So he was no angel.
So before I hand it off to Ann, who's going to get into how you develop these recipes for commercial distribution out of really the family lore and scraps of paper, I'd like to ask, in as much as you know, how did Arthur go about getting the ingredients to make all of these different things, at least in a reliable way, so that he could do these recipes? I just can't imagine you run down off to Amazon or Walmart and get a bottle of turmeric,
No, Arthur, he made just about everything, either made or purchased or acquired in some way. But where we're using onion powder or garlic powder, he was growing it and drying it out himself and grinding it, or something to that effect. Some things that he was using, he was able to buy, in town at the store. He had a relationship, it appears, with like trainmen that came to the area too. My dad.
That makes a lot of sense.
And
they both got something the other one wants, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so it's interesting. So we have the benefit of longevity in our family. So Arthur is not an anomaly. That side of my family, just about everybody makes it to 100 or better. And so right now we actually have we have 9 people in my dad's generation that remember sitting on his lap and hearing him tell stories. But those same people also remember the flavors that he was producing. I'll circle back to that. One of the things that, when my dad talks about what he remembers about going to visit Grandpa Arthur, because it was his great grandpa, what he remembers going to visit Grandpa Arthur had a parrot, like a for real Pollywonka cracker parrot. And you have to ask yourself, where in rural central Illinois does a former slave find a parrot, as a companion? And it's like 1940, 1941, 1942. Where's the parrot come from? And his story was, I got it off a train. So one of the trainmen that he had a relationship with liberated a parrot that was clearly traveling somewhere, and that parrot outlived Arthur.
Goat leg for a parrot, or one of those kind of deals, probably, huh?
So I'm trying to think, but I think that's for the more obscure items. I think he was relying on other folks that were travelers. One thing, interesting piece. Remember I told you, as a slave, he was a slave in Kansas City, Missouri. So you think Missouri, Illinois, you can't, as a slave, if you ran away, you can't go east because the Mississippi River's there. It's insurmountable. So it's burned in his mind that if I ever get a chance to bolt, I got to go north in order to get away because I can't get across the Mississippi. Even though he were legally freed, he still walked north up to Iowa because he was afraid he wouldn't be able to get, across the Mississippi still. And in his travels, he actually came across a stand of hickory trees on a farm somewhere in the center of Iowa, or not the center, but like the south east corner of Iowa. He came across a stand of hickory trees that, for him as a student of nature itself, I think there are like 27 different varieties of hickory trees, something to that effect. And we all know that the soil, the water conditions, the mineral composition of the soil all has a lot to do with the flavor that's imparted into things that grow in that soil. And for him, even when he got established like 30, 40, 50 years later, if he had a really important city festival that he had to cook for, he would hitch his horse to his wagon and go all the way back over to Iowa and load up with hickory from that particular farm. I have a photo. I'll post it on our social media, and you guys will understand what it is. But there's a photo of he's not in the picture, but one of his nephews was with him, and he's standing next to a truck. Clearly, they drove over this occasion, but he's next to a truck that has like the map of the state of Iowa outlined and a little star that shows where they were. We've lost contact with where that is, but that was how important having the right ingredients were to him about creating flavor.
Wow. So I definitely get the feeling that barbecue has continued to be a big part of his family, your family, all of this time forward. So let's jump forward a whole bunch of years to really the beginning of Old Arthur as a commercial endeavor and how that came to be, and I'll hand it off to him.
Yeah. This is just such an incredible conversation already. I just have goosebumps. Thank you so much, Eudell, for sharing your story, your family story, and the comment about barbecue history lesson is just so true. Here's another one. These are just so great. I want to share. Incredible history lesson, a story of perseverance and passion. I can't wait to add your product to my lineup. Thank you, Arthur. I mean, that's just what it's all about. Sharing the flavors with new
and that's why we do this.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, in terms of developing the flavors and the recipes commercially, I know that authenticity is such an important part of this brand. And you mentioned, I think you said 9 family members, familiar with the flavors that Arthur, produced. So how do you go about that in a modern, day with these recipes that have been literally handed down via spoken word so many years ago?
It's difficult in so many different ways. We are fortunate, however, you have to appreciate Arthur wasn't literate. He could not read, he could not write. My dad said that he could recognize his name if he saw it on a piece of paper, but that was about it. But we're fortunate by virtue of where he moved in Kewanee in central Illinois. He got married, he started a family. His children did go to school. And so we have his recipes by virtue of his children's handwriting. And when I say children, it's not necessarily little kids, because they all made it to 100 too. And so they are his kids, but they're probably adults when they wrote most of the stuff down. But we actually have some recipes in which we have different iterations of the recipe itself. And one of the biggest challenges was, one, the sourcing of the ingredients, because like I said, he was making a lot of his own ingredients. And some of the things like white pepper plays a big part in a lot of the different things that we make. He wasn't making his own white pepper. He was getting that from somewhere. Who knows where it was coming in from, off the train. It could have been coming in from the Orient. It could have been who knows where. But the other half of it is that the recipes themselves, they weren't relying on traditional measures like a teaspoon, a tablespoon, a cup. It was a little pinch, a big pinch, a palm. And so first you had to try to you had to look at pictures of Arthur's hands that look like catcher's mitts and try to figure out, okay, so his pinch is definitely gonna be bigger than my pinch. Let's start with a tablespoon. And so there's with every recipe that we have commercialized, and we have a lot more we haven't done anything with, but for every recipe that we commercialize, we're fortunate that those 9 folks that are still alive and remember like hearing his voice, I remember his food, they're also real quick to say, nah, it doesn't taste like Arthur's. Or too much garlic, too much. So we have right now we've got a built-in, test kitchen and critics that are fantastic about recalling their memory. All of those folks, ages 72 to about 92, 93, every single one of them still driving, living on their own, getting around, no real ailments in there. So they're going to be here, and we've got plenty of time to commercialize more recipes with them.
That's fantastic. Here's a comment. It's all about the right ingredients. Speaking of ingredients, it starts with the foundation of Old Arthur's.
Absolutely. So we've done our best to be true to his the spirit of his recipes. So like our barbecue sauce, when we first started, we were just glad to get it in a bottle, and it wasn't that long ago. You know, it's like 12 years ago that my father and I put our heads together and said, let's try to tell his story through his products, because we were already both Black History month of February. He was in schools telling stories about Arthur. I was in schools telling stories about Arthur. And we just thought it'd be neat to be able to take something from Arthur's life with us for these folks to sample. And that was part of the emphasis behind putting getting these products commercially made. And so as we're working with sauces were first, as we're working with the bottler, and we're going through, with our co-packer, we're going through the recipe that takes it pretty good. It's about 90% of the way to if we made it at home. And by the way, that's about as close as you can ask for when you're having somebody else mass produce something for you. But it was pretty close. But then when we started looking at picking apart the recipe, there's a lot of extra stuff in there. And so we started pushing back on it, and we came away with a clean recipe, no high fructose corn syrup, non-GMO, no soy, no even like Worcestershire sauce has fish in it. So thinking about people with allergies now, no fish in the soy that we're using, but the flavor is true to Arthur's flavor. It's complex, it's layered, it hits you in waves.
Did you find that helped when you backed off on these modern products that didn't exist when Arthur was around? And
I thought it did. I thought it gave it richer, deeper flavor. And the interesting thing about it was, like, our co-packer pushed back a little bit, and he's shaking his head. He's like, "It's going to cost you. It's going to cost you, to make these changes." And we don't add any sugar. But the first thing that hits your tongue is, oh, that's a really nice sweet. And then you get, so the brown sugar hits your tongue. Then you get like the richness of the tomato. Then all of a sudden you taste some garlic and onion. And oh, by the way, here comes that vinegar twang that kind of catches you right below your ear there.
I know the one.
And then there's a little bit of heat. If you're paying attention, there's a little bit of heat to finish. And so, with sugar being the first thing that hits your palate, the sweet, you would think that the sugar content is through the roof. We have half the amount of sugar as just about any sauce on the wall behind Jeff there. So we have 11 grams of sugar in a 2 tablespoon serving. The average sauce is like 18, 19, 21 grams in that same amount. And it's because of the balance in those natural ingredients that he was able to achieve.
It's pretty remarkable. I'm thinking, you said balance, and that makes me think of the bootleg dry rub in particular. In our flavor guide testing, we rated that a 2-3-3-2. So a salt of 2, a sweet of 3, a savory of 3, and a heat of 2.
Okay.
So that particular one, and this is all done, just very quickly for those not familiar, all blinded. We don't know what we're testing when we're testing it. We sample the products in many different formats. One of the ways is cooking with them, because you can't really judge a rub, straight out of the bottle. You throw fat and fire in there and things change. And I think that bootleg rub was the one that we perceived with our own palates as having a little bit more of the sweetness than the other batch, of products. And that, we both perceived balance in that particular one. So that was just a really, neat thing that we noticed. And to your point of, lower on the sugar content, I think all the other seasonings, we rated the lowest level of sweetness. And sweetness is not a measure of how much sugar, just the degree to which we, perceive sweetness in our own testing. So some of our, some of the things that we noticed in our own testing. Want to add anything, to that?
Oh, the sauces, I'm a big fan of both. Kansas City, born and raised, so definitely taste those Kansas City roots he may have taken with them in those sauces, and I'm just a sucker for that exact flavor. But we've had much more experience at this point with the seasonings, so let's get into some of the individual ones. I got to start out with, it's hard to pick a favorite, but I've got a couple I can narrow it down to, because I am a sucker for a spicy rub. I do a lot of high temperature cooking on the barbecue, so in a drum I'm often at 300 degrees or so, and it's pretty easy to burn out the flavor of a lot of rubs. They seem like they're a little spicy when you taste them out of the bottle. 4 or 5 hours later at 300 degrees, it's just not there anymore. Sure. But I think Crossroads Dry Rub, for me, is going to be one of the ones that I just reach for time and time again. And what I especially like about it is it's got big salt, it's got really bold savories, but it's got plenty of kick without having that sweetness to it. There's tons of sweet and heat rubs out there because that's a classic barbecue flavor. Everyone who ever watched Pitmasters on TV knows, well, you need sweet and heat rub to, go win a trophy or to make good barbecue. And I like to layer in a lot of other flavors, and using that as a canvas lets me add however much or however little sugar I want to. And sometimes when, you're doing competition stuff, this will be an amazing rib rub, I'm sure, but when you're doing competition stuff, you got to kind of watch the amount of sugar, because that's what can turn really dark on you and kind of mess things up. So that'll be one of my go-tos. How about you?
Yeah, that smokestack is one of the ones I think I'll reach for. There's a lot of rubs out there that have a smokiness, a vibe about them and a flavor profile. And this one, for me personally, it hits really nice. It's not overwhelmingly smoky, but it's got that smoky vibe that
I get the umami part of the smokiness is the first thing I taste in that one. Like when we put it on a pork chop, that's kind of our canvas protein because it's so neutral. And the first thing I got was kind of an umami hit from that. Any idea what that's coming from?
Possibly heavy on garlic, heavy on onion combination. There's got a little white pepper in there too.
Yeah, so, the kick creeps up very subtly, but then all of a sudden you're like, oh, there is something there. Here it comes.
It actually has 3 different varieties of pepper in it. So, but heavier on the white pepper than any other kind.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And for me, the Stockyard Steak Rub is also a really interesting one. And in our testing, I remember this distinct feeling with that one in particular, that there's a sense that's a little familiar, maybe with what this rub is, kind of all about, but there's a certain uniqueness in the execution and in the way that the flavors, really hit. So it really was just an interesting sense about that particular one. And I kind of had the same sense, with some of the other dry rubs, in the line. And I mean, I imagine that obviously is from, the rich tradition that you have and, tweaking those recipes. And delivering the modern flavors with those, family inputs.
Well, if you think about it, Arthur had almost a century worth of effort into refining, these recipes, and it's just man hours that we could never hope to achieve. If you think about each of the rubs they stand by themselves. You can have them with or without the complement of sauce, and even when you add sauce, it's complementary, and it doesn't necessarily drown out the flavor of the rub. So I appreciate all your comments.
So speaking of sauce, both Ann and I have been lucky enough to meet Eudell in person. And Ann, when you first met Eudell, you were standing on a stage while he was collecting some awards. What was that about?
Yeah, the NBBQA in 2022. Jeff and I traveled. Where were we, in Fort Worth? I think we were in Fort Worth.
Fort Worth.
Yeah, in Fort Worth. And, we had some entries of our own, and I remember hearing Old Arthur's again and again. And I think that was the first place. I know you've had multiple first places. I don't remember if that was the mild tomato category or the spicy tomato category.
Mild and 22.
Yep. You all got some hardware there, and I remember at the end of the ceremony, Paul Buab of Smoke and Ghost Barbecue, big Illinois, fan, and
he's been a great mentor.
Been a great friend and a great, barbecue family. He asked all of us from Illinois to get a picture together. So, I really didn't know you at that time, and it's only recently that I've gotten to know you. But I just went back earlier today to look at one of Paul's posts, and there we are with your son.
Yeah.
And you got the hardware around your necks, and all I got was a little certificate. So very cool.
And I didn't get to meet you till about a month ago at an event out at Barbecue Pro Shop. Eudell was nice enough to come, and he had prepared some pork shoulder and was sampling the sauces. But we got to talking about seasonings, as barbecue people will, and how to use them. And one of the things you recommended was the bootleg dry rub on brisket. And I was a little bit skeptical because I hadn't tried it yet, but I knew it was kind of a bourbon-infused rub. Now that I have tried it, I would have no reservations whatsoever about using it. It won't get you drunk. You don't taste like a Jim Beam kind of flavor or anything, but it just adds to the complexity of the sweetness, I feel, without adding that sugar that I'm not necessarily looking for in a brisket rub. What other recommendations do you have for folks out here who are listening about if maybe they want to try one or two of your seasonings? What would you recommend some of the go-to can't mess ways to use it?
Well, let's start with the more unique of our dry rubs. And you've talked quite a bit about bootleg. Bootleg is just wonderful for a well-marbled piece of beef. So I love it on a ribeye. I really like it for a brisket, particularly the point. And it's so well balanced. It does have a little bit of brown sugar in there, but it's not heavy on the brown sugar. It's bourbon, salt, brown sugar, some couple different types of chili pepper, some smoked paprika, and it's just really. Oh, I forgot about the coffee. It does have a bit of coffee in there, and the coffee, the aroma. You can smell it when you're cooking with it. You can smell it as you're eating it, but it doesn't. You have the aroma in your nasal cavity, but you don't necessarily get very much of the coffee on the palate. So, like a lot of times, folks will read coffee on the side of the label, like, "No, I don't like coffee." Trust me, you're not really going to get the flavor. You're going to get an essence in the aroma. It's the bourbon, the brown sugar, the chili that is really the heart of that particular dry rub. It's got shallot in there as well. And I love it, not only for beef, but like a thick cut pork chop. But here's a little hidden secret, something we do with it all the time at the house. We will peel a sweet potato and then cut it into nice little slabs about the thickness of a deck of playing cards. Brush it with olive oil, hit it with some bootleg, and then grill both sides. They give it about 3 minutes, direct fire on both sides. You talk about a wonderful little side dish for like grilled chicken or grilled pork chop. That's it right there.
I bet you can almost serve that for dessert with the sweet potato sweetness.
Sweet potatoes at the Belmonte house, so we'll be trying that one.
So if you check our, I think both Facebook and Instagram, if you dig down in there, I also have a recipe that uses bootleg for sweet potato salad. It's killer.
Ooh.
Oh, wow.
That sounds amazing. Here's a comment along the same line. Bootleg is our favorite for potato wedges. The coffee flavor with sweet and heat, the best.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a pretty versatile rub. So I would move you from bootleg to another really unique rub that we have, and you talked about a little bit before, Gold Dust.
Yeah.
Gold Dust is probably the most difficult rub for me to describe, but it's the one that we use by the pound here at home. It never leaves the counter. It's always right by the stove. We use it in the house as much as or more than we do out on the grill. It's literally a part of every single meal. We use it for grilled and roasted vegetables, little olive oil, little Gold Dust, just in the oven, 400 degrees, 20 minutes. It never met a vegetable it doesn't like. Shaking it in eggs. I literally skillet potatoes. But that Gold Dust was Arthur's shoulder rub. He used it exclusively. And when you look at the pictures on our website of like the Hog Fest and the other big open pit barbecues, that was the recipe for the rub that he used for shoulders. Now, we did take one liberty with it. He had cayenne pepper in it, and I just didn't think it looked real attractive. So I swapped the cayenne pepper out for a different color pepper that gives it its golden hue. And when he didn't care anything about the look because nobody was seeing it anyway because he was so secretive about his recipes. But us putting it in a bottle, it just didn't look attractive. So that's one of the few places that we took liberties.
It does have a really cool gold flavor, and being sugar-free,
Yeah.
I can see why that would be a go-to for open pit style cooking. The shoulder, if it's going to cook it all night, you probably don't want much of that.
In fact, Brian, you mentioned the pork chops as one of the kind of palate that we, do our testing with, some of our testing with. And I got to tell you, on a grilled pork chop, it's really phenomenal.
Yeah.
And I remind you, Brian, you said, ... when we were doing our testing, and this is when we didn't know what we were testing.
Yeah, we do them all blind, so
Yeah.
we don't know what we're eating.
Said, kind of addictive, though. It's really intriguing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, I can't wait to try it. I'm not as good at this as my grandmother was, but she was like the queen of making a skillet fried pork chop and just could nail it perfectly every time.
Yeah.
I think that's where I want to go with that seasoning nest, with that crust you get from the
Yeah.
cast skillet. That's going to work, and you can put it on those oven potatoes. Huh?
So that's my secret for a ribeye with bootleg. A little bit of butter in the bottom of cast iron, and season your bootleg or your ribeye with bootleg, and just sear both sides. Get a nice little crust on there. I'll cut up some Brussels sprouts. I'll have them and put them face down in that butter. That's eating.
So just a quick public service announcement for our audience. If you have any questions you'd like us to ask Eudell on your behalf, please post them now. We'll be wrapping up pretty soon and getting to our giveaway where one of you lucky folks is going to get to try some of these awesome Old Arthur products. So while we're kind of in the home stretch here, Jeff, have you had any favorites from the lineup that you particularly like?
You know, it's funny. I haven't quite gotten past the sauces yet. I have a cabinet full of rubs, and so I haven't cracked open one of those yet. But the sauces both came home with me. I was given a very small squeeze bottle with it. I had a big barbecue, and everyone kept saying, "Which one is this one? Which one is this one?" They loved it. I did a bunch of pork shoulder, and they just kept squeezing it on there, going, "What is it? What is it?" And my brother-in-law, Kenny, he bought a bottle, and another one of his good friends too, and he kept calling me every day. He's like, "I put it on eggs. It was phenomenal. We put it on everything. It's on our table. It's like a bottle of ketchup now on our table."
That's awesome.
And he loves the spicy, so the sauces. But now after hearing about these, and my wife Gretchen, who's a big sweet potato fan, she makes those on a lot of meals. I think a bottle of that Gold Dust is coming home with us for sure, especially when you're talking pork chops, because I got one of those waiting for me at home. So.
Yeah.
So, Eudell, you developed some great recipes. Where can folks find them? I've got some cards that you handed out at,
Sure.
at the Show and Tell at Pro Shop, but where else can folks find you the recipes you've developed?
If you hit our either like our Instagram or Facebook pages, we've started posting. They're not in any one space. They're kind of all over the place. But if you search between our Instagram, our Facebook, and even I put a few like on our website. I haven't been real religious about putting them all together, but I promise you that I will in the coming week or so. I'll start posting. But I do have a ton of recipes. And if you're out there and you're watching this, if you decide that you want to try something, you're looking for a recipe, direct message me because I'm happy to send a recipe your direction to help you with whatever rub or even the sauce that you might have just got from Jeff.
That's great. I remember from the showroom grand opening, you were doing a little sampling. And if Jeff, keep me honest here, I think I recall a lot of Old Arthur's sauces and many of the dry rubs moving through.
we sold out of the couple of cases that I had.
Yeah.
Someone went home with every single one of them. So yeah, that was a good one.
I'm looking at a question in the so our go-to dry rub for fish, Crossroads. You'll thank me later. Crossroads is wonderful for like fish, salmon, shrimp, scallops, right there.
Awesome. Yeah, we take it. For me personally, we had to tag it with awesome on everything because I can't think of really anything I couldn't use that seasoning with just by the nature of its balance. Like I said before, I can't wait to try it on ribs. We have done it with shrimp that we just did on a flat top, on the, what do they call that thing, the Blackstone.
Yeah.
Works perfectly well for that. You don't even really need to put much, but a little olive oil on the grill or your high temp oil, what is that, grapeseed oil. But we just sprinkle the stuff right on the shrimp once we get the shells off, and then they go straight on the flat top, and that's phenomenal.
If you look on, we've posted the recipe, and again, Facebook or Instagram, it's on in both places. We make what we call a shrimp lollipop. So imagine, you've got the shrimp that's shaped like a C. We'll take like a piece of sausage. Andouille's my favorite. Just cut it into coins that are about 1/4 of an inch thick. Take that piece of andouille and fit it into the C portion of the shrimp. Throw a skewer up through the shrimp, through the andouille, and then back out of the shrimp. If you then hit that with a little bit of melted butter and then some Crossroads, grill it for 3 minutes on both sides.
So if there's any SCA ancillary chefs in the audience tonight, I think you just have a big fat tip from Eudell. In fact, speaking of SCA, Ann and I do a lot of steak competitions, and one of the things that's nice about that format is we're competing against each other and everybody else. In barbecue formats, we were one team partnered to produce our proteins, but now we go head to head. And one of the things that we always do is we're constantly testing flavors. So we have kind of our go-to L7 recipe that we've perfected over a couple years. And one of us always runs that. The other one almost always runs something that's a little bit tweaked. And so one of the easy ways for me to do that is with my finishing rub that I'll put in a grinder and then just come right over the top and put a little of that in right on the bottom of the steak so it hits the judge's tongue first. And for our next practice, I'm going to try this Stockyard steak dry rub for that particular application because when I tested, I wrote, so it opens with this earthy flavor, and then every now and then I get a tiny pop of sweet, a little bit of twang, and a hint of celery seed. I don't know if all those things are in there or not, but I get all of that. And I think once I hit them with my thumb grinder, so those are just freshly cracked open, that's going to wake some people up at the table.
That's interesting. And it's funny how flavor profiles change depending on how finely you grind. And we found that in exercising our sauce recipe with a co-packer, they were close, it just wasn't quite there. And then my son, who is, you'll see photos of him all over the place if you check out our social media. He is absolutely my right hand in just getting any and everything done. My son commented, he's like, you know, I can feel the granules. It feels like the garlic and onion. I can feel it on the roof of my tongue if I roll my tongue across the roof of my mouth. And that made like the guy, you know, the co-packer, it was actually the shed, we were down at the Shed Barbecue. So they have a sauce manufacturing operation as well. And so Brad Orison, he kind of looked at us and he went and got this big hand blender, stuck it down in the test pot and just cranked it for a couple minutes. And then he's like, let's try it now. And it was a totally different sauce, and it was exactly where it was supposed to be flavor-wise. And it was because he took the time. The cooking didn't break down the granules the way that the hand blender did. So it just makes a difference.
Well, while Jeff's getting the winner ready to go and announce, I'll just remind everybody, if you want to give Old Arthur's a follow, you can find them at Facebook at Old Arthur's, and then Instagram is Old Arthur's BBQ, right?
It is. Yes, it is.
Very good.
All right.
Here's
Well,
one
Jeff,
more
are
comment.
we got
We got one more comment. This is a good one. This all sounds amazing. I will be checking this out.
Yeah, please
Definitely,
do
folks,
that.
check this out.
I promise you won't be disappointed. Like I said, Crossroads and Gold Tust are my easy recommendations, but these are all very, very good seasonings that I guarantee are not going to be exactly or quite like anything else you've had before. So, Eudell, thank you so much for being with us tonight. It was a blast talking to you, and can't wait to see you down the road out on the barbecue trail.
Absolutely. Hope to cross paths with you soon.
All right. Well, Jeff, I guess you get to do the final formalities.
The big
here. We got a
winner. We have the winner. The IG handle of the winner is _Harding. The name Liam Harding, you're the winner. You will be receiving some delicious Old Arthur's, and we chose Old Arthur's spicy barbecue sauce, and the Smoke Freaks recommended the Barbecue Pro Shop Factory the Stockyard Steak Dry Rub to go along with it. So you're going to be getting both of those sent to you. If you're still here, go ahead, just DM us directly, or we will be reaching out to you to get your address. We'll get those shipped out to you as soon as possible.
Hope Liam's not a SCA cook, because I just gave him the secret I was going to try down in Collinsville next week. So, all right. Well, thank you, everybody, so much for joining us. We've had a blast talking about all of this, and join us again in about a month when we will be rolling yet another edition of Factory Team Flavor Talk.
Yes, absolutely.
Thanks
for having me. I
everybody.
enjoyed it thoroughly.
Thank you, Eudell. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night.
We'll see you soon. Have a good night.
Take care.
Bye-bye.